Hi, I'm Allison, and this is Learning Literature. If you have any requests for writing topics that you'd like help with, please put them in the comments. Today, I'll be talking about how to incorporate quotes into your essays. I'll look in some detail at a sample essay and how you could bring quotes into it. But before I do, some general advice. The first point that I have is about selecting quotes, and it's to make sure that you do not bring in quotes that are just giving plot summary. Remember that your quotes are the facts that you're providing to prove a certain claim is true. If you just tell us what happens in the book, there's not really much debate about it, and it's unlikely that the basic plot will be enough to support any certain claim that you're offering about the book. Instead, try to find quotes where the language in the quote says exactly the idea that you are trying to demonstrate. You want all of your analysis to focus on defending your thesis. Hopefully you've structured your paper well so that you have a clear thesis and supporting paragraphs designed to demonstrate that that thesis is true. The quotes that you bring in then need to work towards those supporting paragraphs. Everything needs to work as an argument, where the quotes are the facts that are provided to prove your claim is true. Once you provide the quote, you need to offer some analysis to show what the quote is doing. Why is it important, and how does it demonstrate your claim? In order to show this, it can help to focus on the exact language within the quote. Often your analysis can be strengthened by emphasizing a certain word choice that the author has made. So try to review your quotes and see if there's any specific words that you can focus on in your analysis to really support your claim. The last piece of advice that I have is what I give for all writing assignments, and that is to write badly at first. Give yourself permission to use small words or make your sentences too long or too short or too clunky. It doesn't need to be beautiful at the beginning. Hopefully you'll have time for writing revisions at the end, but even if you don't, by focusing on good content, clear ideas, and a good explanation of them, then you'll have a pretty solid essay, even if the writing isn't as great as it could be. Okay, so I'd like to make up a sample essay. I've thought about an assignment on Fahrenheit 451, maybe a very general assignment that said, discuss a main theme of Fahrenheit 451. And I've developed an outline that I would have created for that sort of assignment. I have a thesis with a main theme of the book. Fahrenheit 451 demonstrates that thinking makes a person happier. I've come up with 3 support paragraphs and topic sentences for them. Society has eliminated thinking, people are not happy, and books are valuable in enabling a person to think and then be happier. And for each of my support paragraphs, I have 2 pieces of evidence that I would use to demonstrate that the specific claim in the topic sentence is true. If you want help developing an outline like this, I have another video where I talk all about it. I'll link to it in the description. Let's assume that you've developed an outline like this. You know the basic ideas that your support paragraphs will be making, and you've selected the examples that you're going to use as evidence in those support paragraphs. Now it's time to select quotes that demonstrate that those pieces of evidence are true. I'm going to zoom in on the first paragraph, talking you through the quote selection and how to write with quotes. Hopefully that will be enough of an example that you'll be able to copy that pattern for the rest of an essay. Our first paragraph then is defending part of our main thesis, and it's talking specifically about what has happened in this society. In order to support the thesis that thinking makes a person happier, I think it's important in this novel to show how people don't think, and that's because society has eliminated thinking. My first piece of evidence is that mentally empty activities, like watching television or driving fast, are explicitly promoted in this society. In order to talk about this, I thought Clarice would be a good example because she doesn't do those things and she thinks, so she's really an outlier in society. At this point, you'll probably need to go back to the book and reread some key scenes, looking specifically for quotes that would support this claim. If you get lucky and you noticed something when you were first reading the book, or maybe a teacher or a friend pointed out a helpful sentence, You might already have something highlighted, but it's more likely that you don't, and you'll need to go back to key scenes and try to find a quote that will work. Remember, we don't want a quote that merely tells us what society does, like society supports watching television, because that's not really in debate. Everyone agrees that that's what's happening in society. The question is society explicitly eliminating thinking? Are these activities, television and driving fast, specifically working towards the elimination of thought? In order to find a quote that fit, I was not sure where to look, but I was hoping that Clarice would be helpful because she does not engage in those activities and she does think. So by sort of providing a contrast, I was hoping to show that society is trying to eliminate thinking with those activities. As I was reading in the early pages where she is talking to Montauk, I found a quote that I think would work great. She says, "I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks. So I have lots of time for crazy thoughts, I guess." This works so nicely because it's showing us that the people who do those activities, television and driving fast, they don't have the time for crazy thoughts. It's only because Clarice does not engage in those activities that she does have time to think. And so, by promoting these mentally empty activities, society is working towards its goal of eliminating thinking. I thought that this quote would work nicely. You can see already how to do citations for quotes, but I'll come back and talk about that in more detail when we're actually writing the paragraph. The second piece of evidence that I have in this paragraph is that books are burned because they make people think. When I was brainstorming my evidence, I specifically had in mind the conversation with the fire chief, with Beatty, so I knew that I wanted to go back and reread that scene. That conversation is really dense, so it took me some time to read it carefully, looking for a quote that would really suit my purposes. I think I found a good one here because it talks about the significance of books and their connection to thought. "A book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man?" The quote that I chose is not an easy one. There's a lot of content in it, and I might or might not be confident that I can do a good job explaining it. But at least when I'm reading the quote, I'm pretty sure that it's directly on my topic. He talks about burning books, and that has something to do with breaching man's mind. I know that there's content here suggesting that books are connected to people's abilities to think, and that the society burns books to make sure that people can't think. Whether or not I do a very thorough job of analyzing this quote, the basic meaning of it will definitely support my claim. So having gone back into the book and reread some sections, I've avoided plot summary and I have found two quotes that are specifically connected to the examples that I'll be using in this support paragraph. Let's talk about how to actually write the paragraphs with those quotes. To start with, I'm going to offer a general pattern, and then we'll look at how to actually do it with the quotes that I've provided. As a general pattern, this is what your paragraphs should look like. There could be some variety, and you can make a choice to do it differently, but this is a good guideline to use. You should start with your topic sentence. This is a claim that you're making just for this paragraph. Overall, the claim of this paragraph should connect back to your thesis, and it should be clear from your outline how your 3 topic sentences work to support your thesis. Okay, so each paragraph will start with a topic sentence, and then you'll transition right into your first piece of evidence. Your first supporting idea will be explained in the second sentence. You want to then set up the quote. This is a very brief summary, maybe a sentence, maybe even less. You're basically just describing who says the quote and what is happening in the book in the moment that he says it. If it helps, you can give a little insight into the character's thought process or emotions at that moment. You just want about a sentence to explain the context for the quote. And then you want to just give the quote. If you can weave it into a sentence, that's great. If the quote just stands on its own, that's okay too. Then you'll give a sentence explaining the basics of what the quote means. If the quote is extremely straightforward, you might not need this sentence. If it's a complex quote, then you want to explain to the reader just the basics of what the quote is saying. Be sure not to copy the language of the quote. Instead, in your own words, explain what the quote is saying. And then you want an explanation of how the quote is supporting this particular point. Each paragraph is making a claim, and within that claim, you have some more specific evidence that you're providing. The quote is providing facts that that evidence is true, and thus strengthening your claim. But you need to do the work to show that to the reader. So you need to explain what the quote really means. How does it connect back to your topic sentence? How does it show the evidence that you're claiming it demonstrates? And then you'll repeat that process for the second supporting idea. You'll explain what the supporting idea is, you'll set up a quote, you'll give the quote, and then you'll explain and analyze it. At this point, your paragraph is done. You have a topic sentence giving the claim of the paragraph, two key examples serving as evidence for that claim, and then quotes, which are providing, in a sense, the facts showing that the evidence really does work and the claim really is supported. Your analysis then is doing the work of showing how do the quotes really support the claim. Let's look at this with an example. We'll go back to our first paragraph for Fahrenheit 451. The first things that we need are the topic sentence giving the claim of the paragraph and a support sentence giving the first main supporting idea. We already had that from our outline. Society has eliminated thinking. Mentally empty activities, television driving fast, are promoted to distract people from thinking. This came right from our outline. So far the paragraph has been really easy to write. The next thing that we need is a basic setup for the quote, pointing to where the quote is said in the book, and then the actual quote. We have the quote selected, but we don't have a setup yet. So this is some additional writing that we'll need to do. My first quote happens when Clarice is talking to Montague, and I thought I would provide a little additional context to show some of the emotions around that. When I set up the quote, I said, "When Montague uncomfortably points out that Clarice thinks too much, she explains, 'I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks, so I've lots of time for crazy thoughts, I guess.'" The setup that I've used emphasizes that Montague is uncomfortable with this observation about Clarice. And I'm focusing on the idea that Clarice thinks too much. That's what's making Montague uncomfortable, and that's how she is not following what society wants, because she doesn't participate in these traditional activities. Okay, this is the first time that I've pulled a quote into a paragraph, so let me point out how to cite a quote when you use it. There are two major ways to cite, depending on whether you're writing a humanities paper or a scientific paper. For humanities, like an English course, you'll use what's called MLA citation. So MLA citation says that for in-text citations, that's what we're doing. We're in the middle of the text and we're citing where the quote has come from. You just put parentheses and then just the number for the page. You don't write PG for page, just the number, in this case 9. And then close the parentheses. You also put the period after the citation. So at the end of my quote, normally there would be a period. It is the end of a sentence, but I don't put it there. Instead, I put the period at the end of the citation. The very first time that you're referencing a specific work, you put the author's last name. Since this is the first support paragraph that I have, it's likely that this would be my first quote. So I've put the author's name, Bradbury. But you'll see the next time that I won't do that. I'll just put parentheses and then number for the page number. That's it for the in-text citations. They're pretty easy in MLA format. At the end, you would need a works cited page to show which edition you've been citing throughout your paper. Okay, so we have our quote. It's been set up and it's been given. The next thing that we need is an explanation of what the quote is saying. I want to take just the basic meaning of the quote and put it in my own words. Clarice doesn't participate in the standard activities, so she has more time for other activities, like thinking. Again, this is just the basic meaning of what the quote says, but by putting it in my own words, I've made it very clear to the reader, and I'm able to emphasize what I think are the most important points of this quote. The fact that she chooses not to participate in the activities that society wants her to, and as a result, she has more opportunities for thinking. Now that I've shown what the quote means, I need to show how it connects back to my claim. How is the quote supporting the claim of the paragraph? Society encourages people to engage in mindless activities to fill their time with emptiness, leaving them without the time that Clarice finds for thinking. My explanation here connects back to the topic sentence, the idea that society is trying to eliminate thinking. And it connects to the specific supporting idea that I'm using the quote to demonstrate. That by advocating these mentally empty activities, society is attempting to pull us away from thinking. It is through Clarice, who does not engage in those activities, that we're able to see the opportunity for thought. Let's look at a second example of how to do this by looking at the second support that we have in this paragraph. We have the same topic sentence, of course, because it's the same paragraph. Society has eliminated thinking. And we would still have all of the content that we wrote from the first support point. We'll start in the same way by bringing in the second support point, which we had already written in our outline. Books are burned because they make people think. Now we need to set up the second quote. This happens in the conversation between Beatty and Montag. And I specified that Beatty's attitude in this conversation is varying between offering Montag forgiveness and also threatening him for the crime of stealing books. Beatty is explaining some history about how the society came to burn books, and he draws an analogy, saying that a book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man? Just a quick point. You can see here that the quotation ends with a question mark, so I've kept the question mark in the quotation, but then I've provided a period at the end of the citation. Also, you can see at the beginning of the quote that this was originally the beginning of a sentence, so it was a capital A, but I have it in the middle of a sentence, so I need a lowercase a. So I just put those square brackets around to acknowledge that I've made a change to the original. It's just a way to indicate that the quote has not been copied exactly. I've made a small change of some sort. Okay, so I've set the quote up. I've explained the basic plot point of where this is happening. I've described who's talking and what his intentions are. Now I need to explain the meaning of the quote. What is it saying? As I said, this quote is harder than the other one, so you might have a harder time with the basic explanation. Just take your time. Write it over and over again. Keep changing it, tweaking it. Give yourself permission to write badly. It doesn't need to be perfect at the beginning. If you've selected a good quote, then there's great content here to support your claim. You just have to take the time to explain it, to show how the quote does the work that you're hoping it does. I said Beatty is claiming that books were removed from society because they are like guns, full of potential danger in the ideas that a man might develop. This summary emphasizes the idea that society is trying to remove thought when it's getting rid of books. It's clarifying Beatty's analogy that books are like guns. How are they dangerous? In the ideas that they communicate to a man. They allow men to develop thoughts, and that's how they're dangerous. So that emphasizes my original point. Society is eliminating thinking when it's eliminating books. This helps me prove my specific second idea, that books are burned because they make people think, and is connecting to the overall idea of this paragraph, that society is working to eliminate thought. Now that I've basically explained what the quote is saying, I want to do a little more work to connect it back up to both my specific claim about books being burned because they make people think, and hopefully the overall idea of this paragraph, that society is working to eliminate thinking. My last sentence then says, removing books serves to breach someone's mind, providing a way to break down the defenses formed by good ideas. You can see that I've selected that specific word out of the quote to focus on, to draw attention to it. To breach something is to break through the defenses. When Beatty says that, what is he referring to? What sort of defenses? I'm suggesting it's the defenses formed by good ideas. Books allow people to develop thoughts. If you take books away, they won't have the protection that books provide, protection in the form of good ideas. And so we're emphasizing the claim of this paragraph. Society is taking away books because they don't want people to have ideas. They're trying to eliminate thinking. I suggest that you keep coming back to two questions when you're writing. What is this quote actually saying, and why am I using it? What am I trying to prove here? For this example, it took some time to think about what the quote was actually saying, but by constantly reminding myself, I'm trying to show how society has eliminated thinking. Am I doing that? What is it about books that connects to thinking? What is Beatty saying about books and guns and breaching? So take your time to think about what the quote actually means and think about what you're using it to try to prove. What is the specific piece of evidence that it's connected to? What is the point in this paragraph that you're using it as evidence for? Keeping that in mind will help keep your writing focused and effective in defending a claim. Hopefully that gave you a clear idea of how to select quotes and how to pull them into your support paragraphs. Here's some closing advice. Quality over quantity. If you have a fantastic quote, it does exactly what you want it to do, there's one or two words within it that you know you can say really good things about, that's great, use it. If you can't find a good second quote for that paragraph, it might be fine to just use one quote, especially if it's a rather long quote or you have a lot of analysis that you can provide. Rather than focusing on a certain number of quotes and maybe sacrificing some quality along the way, focus on selecting really good quotes that work to support your evidence very clearly. Read the quote carefully. It's likely that there's specific words in the quote that you can use in your analysis. Make sure, of course, that you understand the quote, but also that your analysis is referencing specific points within the quote and showing how those specific points are working to support your claim. As you're going through this process, be flexible. You might have a specific quote in mind or a specific plot point, but when you go back to the book, the quote just doesn't say exactly what you thought it would say. You might need to make some changes. Maybe you need to look for a different quote. Maybe you can adjust your support sentence. Maybe the original way that you wrote it isn't as accurate as you thought. Now that you go back to this story, you see that you can write a more accurate support sentence that actually fits the quote that you have found. Whichever change you make, be open to making changes. Everything that you're writing can be changed. So as you develop your outline, as you seek out quotes, be open to making sure that everything fits together. And that might mean cutting or changing work you've already done. My last piece of advice is to review citations. Hopefully the quick reminder that I gave about MLA made it clear. And just go back to make sure that you have parentheses and periods all in the right places. It doesn't have a huge impact on your meaning, but it's really distracting if that isn't done properly. So make sure that you cite every time you have a quotation and try to follow the formatting as carefully as you can. Hopefully this gives you some confidence as you go to pull quotes into your writing. If you found the video helpful, please press the like button. And if you have any follow-up questions, put them in the comments.